Good morning. Good morning. I want you for a moment to think about your life. I want you to, for a moment, to imagine if you had the ability to go back in time and talk to a younger version of yourself, and in view of what you know about life, in view of what you know about God, in view of what you know about what's really important in life, what would you go back and tell the younger version of yourself? What would you say is really important? You know, I found it really interesting that the CEO of Goldman Sachs, who is obviously highly wealthy and successful, said that if he would have been able to go back in time, he would have probably told his younger self to chill out, to not take life as seriously as he did. And part of that was because he said he had some of the wrong priorities in life. But I want you to look back and think, you know, now that you're older, now that you're wiser, now that you know the Word of God, now that you know what's important, now that you experience some of the things that the world says you should experience in order to have a good life, what would you tell your younger self? I think about this because what we would tell ourselves, we have an opportunity to share with our children and the younger members of our congregation. Even if you don't have the ability to go back and do that, what would you tell the youth of today within the church? In view of what you know about God, in view of what you know about life, in view of priorities and purposes, what would you say? Would you say and tell them the same things that the world says? You know, get a good education, make money, have prestige, and die. Or is there something more to that? I want us to really change our perspective, because as you get older, perspective changes. Your realization of life's purposes change. And this is one of the things that we want to educate and teach our youth. You know, one of the great lessons I learned when I was younger was to learn to listen to people older than you. I love to learn. I love history. I love learning from people who are older than me. And when I hear them talk, sometimes I always like to take a step back, listen, and meditate on what they said. Just because I know that they've been experienced with life. Because the automatic assumption when you're younger is, you know right and wrong, even though you don't necessarily experience life. But one of the lessons I learned was, in the Bible, the book of Proverbs, it says, pursue wisdom. You know, one of the things that the Proverbs writer doesn't emphasize, he doesn't say pursue experience. He doesn't mention that as much as pursuing wisdom. Because experience is that in which you have to undergo, and from experience, you learn lessons from what you have done right and the lessons of things that you have done wrong. But the benefit of wisdom is that you can learn the lessons of what is right and the lessons that is wrong from not only your own experience, but the experience of other people. That's why we have parents. That's why we have teachers and coaches. Because as someone once told me, I would rather learn from the mistakes of other people than to have to go through that mistake myself. That's right. And that's exactly what we're trying to teach our children. That's wisdom. I don't have to engage in something bad to know that it's bad. That's why teachers will bring in people who have used drugs and alcohol or had parents suffer who lost child from drinking and driving, and they would say, listen to these people, listen to their experiences, because what they're trying to impart is wisdom. So I often think, what would we tell kids nowadays? Because are we sharing the same message as the world? Make money and die. What if there's an eternal question we should be thinking about, an eternal purpose, an eternal reason for why we should go about living our lives in a different way from what the world says? I have to admit, when I was younger, I pursued all those things. I thrived academically, had my life planned out, got into a good career, was about to take off financially. But then one of the things that I kept on thinking about is, do I pursue wisdom or experience? Because the world's telling me this is how you should live your life. But when I listen to the ageless wisdom of God and from those who have been older, so many times I've heard older and wiser and elderly people say, if I was younger, I would have prioritized God more. If I was younger, I would have taught my kids about God more. And every time I hear older Christians talk, and they're talking about what's important as they get closer to the end of their lives, they often emphasize God and how they should have lived their life differently in view of God. And I think about that, and I think, do we do that with our children? I say, kids, you know what? You may not be an all-star NFL player. Someday you may not be the American Idol or The Voice. And that's okay. Because the greatest purpose you could live is one for God and not for self. Do we live and teach our youth that priority? One of the things that I think about was when I was considering going into ministry, if you know anything about me, I like to play things safe. I'm vanilla. My wife says I'm probably the most boring person who have ever lived. I'm just not one of those people that likes to take risks. I like doing things that are predictable, Vanilla ice cream always tastes like vanilla ice cream. That's just how I am. But then I kept thinking and saying, well, if the purpose is to glorify God and to live for Him, am I really pursuing that purpose? When I was considering going into ministry, I had a lot of people tell me I was crazy. A lot of people who kind of insulted me because I worked my whole life to get where I was in business. I thrived academically, won awards, got a good job, and things like that. But the time that I made the decision that I wanted to go to school, to go and learn and to get knowledge of the Bible so I can be a more effective minister, I was on the edge of getting a promotion. My wife and I were pregnant with Paige, so we were going to have a newborn when we went into ministry school. People don't know this, but my wife and I actually lost money because we actually laid down earnest money on a house and was about to buy a house, and we lost that money because we decided we don't want to buy the house because we want to go to ministry school. And I had a lot of people question me about that. And they said, why? And the thought that I kept having is thinking about all these elderly Christians in my life saying, if I would have lived my life over again, it would have had a greater emphasis on God and His purpose. The dangers of experience is sometimes you waste so much of your life learning what you should do that instead you should have wisdom and learn how to live life correctly even sooner. So you have more time to glorify God. Instead of pursuing money and cars and wealth, what if we made this the wealth that we taught our kids to pursue? Teaching them that there's tears of joy that you create, and you get to see the benefit of that because you sacrificed and you made someone's life better or different or holy because of the service and sacrifice you were willing to make. What if we value smiles because someone was hopeless and struggling, but because you served and made a difference in their lives, they've been frowning for a while, depressed, but then you actually bring some hope into their lives and they smile? What about in a world where people are broken and hurting, and you value being able to give a hug of comfort? Kevin's the best, isn't he? And yes. And what if we valued being able to sleep at night? Because we are honored to know that we lived a life that was pleasing to God. You know, in the 90s, there was a famous comedian by the name of Jim Carrey. He's still around. He's actually having a revival, supposedly, in his career. But in the 90s, Jim Carrey was one of the most famous celebrities. And in fact, there were a few years where he was the highest grossing actor. He was making more money on his movies because of his comedy than anyone else. And one of the things that amazed me about Jim Carrey was a comment that he makes. And now, if you know anything about Jim Carrey is very wealthy. He's actually done very well with his investments. And he had that fame, the prestige of knowing I'm the guy out of all my peers. But look at a statement that he made. Jim Carrey said this: "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed so they can see that it's not the answer." You know what? He has that Malibu home. He had a beautiful girlfriend who committed suicide this year. He had everything that the world says you should pursue, and Jim Carrey had it all. And after receiving it all, he kind of had the mentality of the writer of Ecclesiastes. He said, you know, it's all vanity. It's all meaningless. And I think about that and I say, if a guy like that, who had everything, admits that it's nothing, why would we want to educate and teach our children to have that same mentality? You know, so we listen to someone who had it all. Or what about how we value humanly wisdom nowadays? Look at what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. He is considered one of the greatest philosophers that was born in America. He said this: "The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well." So the man considered one of the greatest philosophers of American history even says, it's not about you. It's not about what you accomplish. It's not about how much you gain. It's about the difference you've made. But then we know the ultimate source of wisdom is God, and he gives that purpose. Isaiah 43 verse 7. He says, "Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made." You know, I've touched on this a lot, and the reason for that is because our culture is teaching us and teaching our kids, you know, it's all about you. But in fact, our purpose in life is for God's glory. And one of the things I want to tell young people is, don't live your life for yourself. Don't live your life achieving the things that the world says is great, because you're going to lose your life. You're going to lose time. And then when you're older, you finally get it. You're going to say, I wish I would have lived my life differently. I want that to be different today. So that today you say, you know what? I know in view of God, in view of life, in view of... I know that it's not about all the things that the world talks about. It's about God's glory, because I can lay my head down and say, I have fulfilled my purpose, and it's an eternal purpose, and it's a purpose that I get to live with in heaven with God forever, knowing that I have touched lives for eternity. And that's the message that we're trying to teach our youth. The eternal purpose. The things that we live for today are so temporary, so meaningless. You know, NFL games started this week. I love football. I love sports. But when it all is said and done, we weren't created for sports and Super Bowl trophies. We were created for God's glory. And that's what we want to teach our kids. The greatest thing that you can do is to glorify God. And I think about this question. Look into your heart and ask, is the way that you're living your life, is your purpose right now glorifying God? Is your outreach, when you wake up in the morning, is your expression of passion saying, today I want to glorify God, it's not about me. Can I touch someone else's life for God's glory and their benefit rather than it being me, even if it costs me, even if it causes me to sacrifice, even if it causes me to eat crow, even if it causes me to be humble, I will do it. You know, oftentimes we want to live a glorified life. That's not why we want praise of men. We want a glorified life. But I tell you, if you want a glorified life, do what Jesus did. Jesus in John 17, when he's praying to the Father, he says these words, I have brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. Jesus lived a glorified life. He had a glorified death because he was living and dying for the one who deserves glory. We often say, I want the glory. Well, if you want the glory, then glorify the one who deserves it. And Jesus made known he glorified God by doing the work he has called us to do. Are you waking up each morning and saying, I'm going to serve God today because that's my purpose. I'm going to glorify God today with my work because that is how Jesus lived a glorified life, and that's how I'm going to have a glorified life. And just as Jesus touched everyone's lives by his humanity and his sacrifice, whether they accept or reject him, he did it for God's glory. Do we do the same thing? Do we do the same thing and say, I want a glorified life. I want to make a difference. At the end of your life, don't you want to ask that question? I made a difference in my kids' life, in the church's life, in my community's life. Because no one cares that you think you're the best. What they care about are the people who touch their lives, especially eternally. You know, one of the things that we have to understand is our purpose is to shine. Our purpose is to bring preservation of goodness and flavor to the world. And we see this in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 through 16. And this is kind of what was an idea of what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. I'm going to hand it over in a little bit. But part of why we're teaching our kids about service is that we're teaching them it's not about you. The purpose is to serve other people so that in seeing you, they see Jesus Christ. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 through 16, and you know this pretty well. But it's important, and you kids, all the kids, teenagers, look at me. This is your purpose. I don't want you to be like Jim Carrey and say, I got the fame, I got the money, I got the girls, I got the good-looking guys, whatever it may be, and it didn't mean anything. But if you'll live this out as your purpose, you're going to have a glorified life because you're glorifying the one who deserves glory. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 through 16 says this, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A town is not built on a hill, nor can it be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Are people looking at you and seeing light? Are people looking at you and saying, I can see God now? Because people can't see in the dark. But when Christians arise and they shine, then they can see, and what they see is the Father. And when they see your good deeds and they ask, why would they serve me? Why would they sacrifice for me? Why would they do what they do? You can give them the answer, Jesus Christ. And that causes questions. You know, some of the greatest experiences in my life, and you ask people, and I tell people, think of some of the best moments of your life. They often say, you know what, it was the times you touched someone else's life. I think about when I was a teenager, I was given lots of opportunities. remember one time where a lot of us, we probably like 20 Church of Christ youth groups gathered together, and then they didn't tell us what we were doing or where we were going, but they drove us to the worst part of Seattle, gave us a whole bunch of sack lunches, and we handed them out to the homeless. And we were supposed to explain, we're doing this for Jesus. You know, we also had an opportunity to go down to the Navajo Reservation in Arizona to help build a church building. The community saw that we were doing that, and we were doing things for their kids and providing benevolence. They would ask why, and we'd say, because of Jesus. Everything that we do is because of Jesus and for his glory. We don't serve just because it makes us feel good or because it's the moral thing to do. We do it ultimately because God deserves the glory, and we want people to know him so that he can save them. That's why we do what we do. That's why we have things like work camp, because we're trying to teach people to serve in the name of Jesus Christ. So I want to encourage you, if you have not been living with that purpose, learn from what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. Learn from what Jim Carrey said. But ultimately learn what God said. And he said, you were created for my glory. And kids, don't waste your whole lives thinking that that's not true. Wasting your whole lives, and then when you're old and lost so many years, you finally get it. Don't seek experience, seek wisdom. Because then you'll live life accurately. So I just want to leave with that note, and then I want to offer it up to Tom to come and share with us some of the experiences. I know so many of you have been investing in our kids by helping them go to work camp. And I really appreciate Mike and Tom and all that they do, and just thank them for how they're teaching our kids to glorify God with their good deeds.
Thanks. Kevin, I guess you can get that slideshow going. This talk with you guys this morning has been about three months in coming. I mean, our work camp was the first week of June of this year, and we've been trying to coordinate that kind of until this. And again, the theme of this Central Ohio work camp, we went over, you guys were part of this. The theme, their catchphrase is taking worship to the streets. Just what Micah was talking about is letting your light shine, being the salt of the earth, being the light of the world, and reflecting the light that is Jesus to the community. And so, you guys were part of this because your church, this church family was a huge part of making this happen over in Ohio. Around 20% of this church family went to Ohio this summer to serve. That's huge. That means you guys helped make that possible by going or supporting us that went. This morning, there's a couple of slightly unfortunate things. One is that I was going to have Mike Miller say some things, and it's his birthday today, but Peggy took him home because he's had some physical issues, so you'd be praying for him. His arthritis was really hurting him today, and so he went home after class this morning. But Mike got this coordinated, our participation with this got coordinated with Mike and his brother, David, who is the minister over in Cincinnati, Ohio. They participated, and we've been joining them now for the last several years. And just a passionate way to show how we can serve, be the arms and legs, hands and feet of Christ through all this. And the kids have fun, but we work them hard. They spend a week of their summer vacation, which is smaller and smaller these days. They actually pay money to go over to Ohio and work their tails off 8 hours a day for the whole week to paint houses. Now we have some fun activities and things in the evenings that you'll see to build connections. And one of the other unfortunate things for today is that some of those connections we were going to try to point out a little bit more. Dion Frazier is one of the leaders over in the Reynoldsburg Church of Christ over in Ohio, and he was going to be here this morning, and I was going to let him share some words with you guys as to what our congregation what you mean to them. And I'm going to wait till he comes and visits to let him do that himself. But he has a passion to come see you guys, because even though he hasn't met most of you, you're now part of his family. You're now part of the family of Reynoldsburg Church of Christ, and Cincinnati Church of Christ, and Alum Creek Church of Christ. And thank you for being a part of that. We've made these connections that are so strong now, and continue to grow year by year as this stuff goes on. What else did I want to say? I could have. I'm not going to talk a whole lot longer, because I want to let at least one other person say a few words. But I could have had any of the leaders. Micah was up here. I could have him talk about his work camp experience. Robin was a leader this year in a group. Jennifer Cox was a leader this year in a group. We painted 12 houses this year, which is more than they've ever done before. And I think Center Road had leadership on at least 9 or 10 of those teams out of 12. A lot of what's been accomplished, what the Lord has been able to do over in Ohio, has been through these hands and feet that have gone to serve. A great example of how to serve Jesus and to serve the community. And they do say, people come by the house that you're working on, just walking down the street, and they thank the kids for what they're doing. They ask them, what in the world are you guys doing? And they say, we're serving God. We're helping this homeowner who can't afford it to get some new paint on his house, or fix up his house or her house. And you'll see some owners in some of these pictures. You'll see kids you recognize. You'll see kids you don't recognize. We split up into groups, not by congregation, but they all get split up into groups that are work crew groups. And so there are no more youth leaders at the beginning of the week. There are crew leaders. And they spend the whole week with those crew leaders that are a mixture of all the different congregations and different both leaders and followers and different age groups. And the kids mentor each other. There's just so many good things about this. Gary Purcell was one of the several first timers to work camp this year, and I thought it pretty much impacted him pretty well. But I'm gonna let him share a few thoughts with you, and stop rambling myself here for a minute. There you go, Gary.
The impact that work camp has is just really immeasurable. I mean, I'll say in the short term, I'm not going to lie, I was probably sore for at least 3-4 days after I got back. But the long-term impact that it had on myself personally, you start off, like Tom said, volunteering your time. We're paying to be there. But you start off like my personal home, and the homeowners, they were very aloof in the very beginning. But then, as time progressed, we were working together, we were laughing together. By the end, we were crying and praying together. I still keep in touch with them. And to kind of, I guess if we just kind of reflect on the sermon and what Tom was just saying, we just really don't know the impact that we're going to have on others. We really don't. We're just called to serve. Just to serve and be the hands and feet of the Lord and get out there and do that and have those opportunities. By the end of the trip, I woke up on that last day and really kind of shedding tears that it was all over and it was time to come home. Even though I wanted to get home, there was a part of me that really didn't want to leave. My kids, this was their 3rd year, and having the opportunity to serve and the impact that it's had, I'd like to share this little story with you. They're not here, so that's cool. But when they The first time that they went, they didn't do it on their own. They didn't want to go. As a matter of fact, Tom had asked the kids who all was signed up and was going to go to work camp. And Alan and Amanda were sitting next to their sister Kaylee, and she had her hand up, and she looks over and she says, "Oh, you guys need to raise your hand." And they looked at her and they said, "We're not going." And she looks at them and she says, No, your dad says you're going." And so they kind of, "Well, okay, And I hadn't told them yet. I was trying to figure out really the way of telling them, to be honest with you. And so anyway, they come in, they plop down on the pew right next to me, and Alan looks over and he says, "So I hear we're going to work camp." I said, "Ooh, well, I was going to tell you." I said, "You know what? You guys just go. I want you to go at least one time and experience it. If you don't want to go again, you don't have to." So they went. The way the Lord worked in them, the impact that it made in their lives, like I said, is hard to measure. Okay? They saw what they were doing for others and the way that impacted them. Okay? That they want to go back. And I didn't have to ask them the second time. I didn't have to ask them the third time. They were like, "We're going." Because they wanted to serve. They saw how they were making a difference for the Lord, making a difference in other people's lives. And it meant giving their time, their summertime, to go do that. I saw them grow spiritually and grow in character that, quite honestly, that's kind of inspired me to go. I mean, I participate in ministry in other ways, but that was the first time that I went to work camp. And like I said, it had a major impact. And I encourage everybody to get involved. And there's other ways of getting involved. You don't necessarily have to get out there and, labor and climb ladders and stuff. There's many other ways of serving. So, and even if you don't go, we had a lot of people here supporting work camp, as we all know, behind the scenes. So, it doesn't take the travel, but like I said, the impact that we make is immeasurable. So, we just have to get out there and be the hands and feet of the Lord and serve. So.
Yeah, it's hard not to get emotional when you talk about this kind of stuff. You can see, you read the Gospels, and you see Jesus' passion for the people. When what he got accomplished first, before he could even talk to them about spiritual things, he had to handle the physical stuff, right? You guys can see that with our tornado relief. I mean, there's so many other examples and opportunities that God gives us to do this kind of stuff. And, meeting the physical needs is just the first step at opening the hearts of those that we work with. Just immeasurable. Gary talked about not only the impact we make on these people's lives. We've changed these people's lives that we've served, but more importantly, selfishly, we've changed our lives in being a part of it. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of them here today, but if you would, if you made it to work camp this year, would you please stand up? And thanks. We had all kinds of rules, and even though. We had desire from people that didn't make it to work camp too. I want to say Dick Heimlich was all about coming this year, and we didn't get him there, but he was all fully behind this, and we had some support, ridiculous amounts of support from you guys financially in sponsoring some of these kids that couldn't easily make the funds to go, to help them to go. So you became their enablers so they could make it. We had just amazing ways the Lord worked. 12 crews worth of paint this year. That's $5,000 plus worth of paint. And the day before the work camp, the judge in Columbus, Ohio, worked through a program that he's got to get the paint donated to the program. Just amazing things like that. There's a meal that they provide, one of the early meals in the week, they provide Chick-fil-A for the kids. And that's about, with 100 plus kids and adults supporting, that was around $1,000. And 2 or 3 members of the churches in Ohio kicked in the 3 or 4 pieces to make that happen. It's like, well, dinner's paid for. You know, there's so many stories like that we can share. So many stories of how we look out for each other. You know, Kaylee will tell you that she saved my life this year from falling off the roof. Some of you guys have heard that story too. There's just so much that we could talk about, and we're not going to talk about it anymore, but please, if you notice somebody that stood up, ask them about it, and tell them about how you've been serving, and tell them that you want to be the hands and feet of Christ, and be a part of that. That's the mission that we've been given, right? And so, again, your support has been tremendous. Your participation in this has been tremendous. This family is a great family of service. And it encourages me anytime not even getting up here and talking about stuff like this, but anytime I just look around and see what you guys are doing to serve the Lord, to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Just keep up the good work, right? Keep up God's good work. Turn it over to... Let's stand and sing. If you guys have anything you're challenged with, anything you want to be a part of this great acts of service, dedicate your life to God, anything like that we can help you with, just come talk to one of us while we stand and sing.